A seismic shift has just occurred in the heart of Washington, D.C., representing one of the most significant victories for presidential authority in modern history. The Supreme Court has delivered a landmark decision, a ruling that not only validates President Trump's America First agenda, but also fundamentally realigns the balance of power between the White House and Congress. At the center of this battle is a staggering sum, $4 billion in foreign aid, funds the president has argued are being squandered overseas instead of being used to help American citizens. This isn't just about money. It's a profound statement on who truly controls the nation's destiny, the elected executive or the entrenched legislative bureaucracy. The court's decision affirms the president's power to act decisively on his promises. In a decisive 6-3 ruling, the nation's highest court has given the Trump administration the green light to withhold over $4 billion in foreign aid that had been allocated by Congress. This monumental decision effectively freezes the funds, overriding a lower court order from a federal judge who had attempted to force the administration to spend the money by the end of the month. The ruling split cleanly along the court's ideological lines, with the conservative majority recognizing the primacy of the executive branch in matters of foreign policy. This is a direct confirmation of President Donald Trump's assertion that he holds the power to unilaterally withhold funds allocated by Congress, challenging a long-held assumption about the legislative branch's power of the purse.
The funds in question were designated for a wide array of international programs managed by entities like the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, and contributed to United Nations peacekeeping operations. The Trump administration has long scrutinized the effectiveness and necessity of such spending, questioning why billions of American taxpayer dollars are sent abroad to tackle issues like disease prevention and access to water in other nations, while pressing needs exist at home. President Trump's notification to Congress made his intentions clear: to cancel $4 billion from these foreign aid budgets while still allowing another $6.5 billion to be spent. This is a targeted, strategic reduction aimed at ending wasteful international spending and prioritizing American interests. The legal journey to this Supreme Court victory began in a lower federal court, where Washington-based U.S. District Judge Amirul Lee, an appointee of the previous administration, ruled that the president must spend the money. Judge Lee's ruling on September 3rd argued that only Congress could formally approve the withdrawal of funds it had previously appropriated. This initial decision was championed by various nonprofit and globalist organizations, such as the Global Health Council, which sued to force the release of the funds. They argued the president's action threatened their operations abroad and violated federal law, an argument that sought to elevate their interests above the president's constitutional authority to conduct foreign affairs. The Trump administration's legal team, led by Solicitor General D. John Sauer, immediately countered this judicial activism, arguing that the lower court's ruling imposed unacceptable restrictions on the president. They contended that forcing the administration to spend the money against its will would severely undermine the executive's ability to engage in diplomatic discussions and manage foreign relations effectively. The administration's core argument was that the president, as the chief executive and commander-in-chief, must have discretion over how and when funds related to foreign policy are dispersed. This is not merely a budgetary issue, but a fundamental aspect of national sovereignty and the president's role on the world stage, a role the lower court attempted to usurp. At the heart of this entire conflict is a powerful and rarely used executive tool known as the pocket rescission. Normally, when a president wishes to cancel or rescind funds appropriated by Congress, he sends a formal request, and Congress has 45 days to consider it. However, the Trump administration utilized a brilliant strategic maneuver by notifying Congress of the rescission request very late in the fiscal year, which ends on September 30th. The 45-day review period becomes irrelevant. The funds simply expire before Congress can act, effectively allowing the president to bypass a potentially obstructionist legislative branch. This bold tactic has not been used in nearly 50 years, demonstrating a decisive approach to cutting wasteful spending.
To fully grasp the significance of this moment, we must look back to the 1970s and the presidency of Richard Nixon. The Impoundment Control Act of 1974 was passed specifically to curtail what Congress saw as President Nixon's excessive power to withhold funds for programs he opposed. For decades, this act has been used to tie the hands of presidents, creating a system where Congress could allocate money with little recourse for an executive who deemed the spending unwise or contrary to national interests. The nonprofit groups who sued the administration argued that the president's pocket rescission would turn this law on its head, but they missed the point. The Trump administration argued it was using the law's own framework to restore executive discretion. The Supreme Court's conservative majority saw the wisdom in the administration's position. Their brief but powerful order stated that the asserted harms to the executive's conduct of foreign affairs appeared to outweigh the potential harm to the nonprofit groups that sued. This is a critical acknowledgement of presidential power. The court recognized that forcing the president's hand in delicate matters of international relations could cause irreparable damage to the nation, damage far greater than the complaints of special interest groups. Furthermore, the court suggested that these groups were likely barred from bringing the lawsuit in the first place under the Impoundment Control Act, a legal concept known as standing. The three liberal justices on the court issued a dissent, penned by Justice Elena Kagan, revealing their deep disagreement with the majority's bold move. Kagan argued that the court was operating in uncharted territory and criticized the majority for granting the administration's emergency request without the traditional process of oral arguments or a fully detailed decision. She expressed concern that the ruling was made on a short fuse and that the weighty question presented did not receive the full consideration it deserved. This perspective, however, arguably prioritizes judicial process over the urgent need to affirm the president's constitutional authority in a rapidly changing world, especially when faced with the hard deadline of the fiscal year's end. Justice Kagan's dissent further lamented the practical outcome of the ruling, stating that the court's decision allows the executive to cease obligating $4 billion in funds that Congress appropriated for foreign aid and that will now never reach its intended recipients. She framed this as a result that conflicts with the separation of powers. However, this view overlooks the other side of the separation of powers debate. The Constitution gives Congress the power to appropriate funds, but it gives the president the duty to execute the laws and conduct foreign policy. This ruling does not erase Congress's power, rather it restores balance by affirming that the president cannot be treated as a mere bank teller, forced to dispense funds without discretion or strategic thought. This ruling is a landmark event in the ongoing debate over the separation of powers. For years, a narrative has been pushed that Congress's power of the purse is absolute, effectively giving them a blank check to fund any project, regardless of the president's agenda or the will of the American people who elected him. This Supreme Court decision powerfully pushes back against that narrative. It suggests that the president's role as the head of the executive branch and the primary agent of foreign policy gives him inherent authority over the final disbursement of funds in that arena. This is a restoration of the executive's intended constitutional role, a role that had been steadily eroded by legislative and judicial overreach over the past several decades. The political reaction to the ruling has been swift and predictable. A spokesperson for the White House Office of Management and Budget celebrated the decision as a massive victory in restoring the president's authority to implement his policies. They correctly noted that the ability of left-wing groups to seize control of the president's agenda has been shut down. On the other side, Democrats in Congress immediately called for action to reassert their authority, urging Republicans to join them in defending the power of the purse. This partisan response underscores the political stakes of the ruling, which represents a clear victory for the Trump administration's populist nationalist agenda over the globalist bureaucratic consensus.
This victory is especially notable given the sheer volume of legal challenges the Trump administration has faced. The Supreme Court has now granted 20 emergency applications filed by the administration since the president's second term began. Both the number of these emergency requests and the high rate of success for the administration are completely unprecedented in modern history, sparking criticism from opponents within the legal community and lower courts. However, this pattern can also be interpreted as a reflection of an executive branch willing to fight for its constitutional prerogatives against relentless opposition, and a Supreme Court that is finally willing to step in and correct the overreach of lower activist judges. The implications of this ruling for the America First foreign policy platform are immense. President Trump was elected on a promise to stop endless foreign giveaways and to put the interests of American citizens first. This decision directly empowers him to do just that. By successfully freezing $4 billion in foreign aid, the president has demonstrated that he can and will use every available tool to fulfill his campaign promises. This sends a clear message to the world and to the political establishment in Washington. The days of unaccountable, automatic foreign spending are over. Every dollar will be scrutinized, and the president will wield his authority to ensure that taxpayer money is spent in a way that benefits the United States. Looking ahead, this ruling sets a powerful precedent for future budget battles between the White House and Congress. It raises critical questions about whether the funding Congress approves will actually be spent, or if the president will use this newly affirmed authority to withhold funds for other programs he opposes. While the court's reasoning was heavily focused on the executive's unique role in foreign affairs, the principle of presidential discretion over spending could have broader applications. This fundamentally changes the dynamic of government funding negotiations, giving the president a significant new point of leverage to enforce fiscal discipline and advance his policy goals against a potentially hostile Congress, ensuring the will of the people who elected him is not ignored.
In conclusion, the Supreme Court's decision is far more than a simple legal victory. It is a fundamental realignment of power in Washington. It is a triumph for the America First movement, a validation of President Trump's constitutional authority, and a powerful check on the entrenched powers of Congress and the judiciary. By successfully wielding the long-dormant tool of the pocket rescission, the administration has reclaimed billions of taxpayer dollars and reasserted the executive's vital role in national and foreign policy. This ruling will be remembered as a moment when the presidency fought back against the bureaucratic state and won, ensuring that the person elected by the American people has the power to enact the agenda they voted for.